I'm a big proponent of consumer-directed healthcare. And with that comes responsibility of education. That's where I fit into this world. How can I become an educator? How can I create awareness, to help families spend those hard-earned dollars more effectively on items that they use every single day, but are completely unaware of that are eligible?
Welcome, listeners. This is your host, Sarah Flusky, and I'm happy to welcome Mike to the podcast. Mike is the Director of Sales and Partnership at FSA Store, which you can find online at FSAstore.com, and he manages a team of account managers. When I first met Mike, his passion around reimbursement benefits was energizing. It's a dorky thing to say. If you work in the reimbursement space, though, you know how much there is to know. When you meet somebody who shares a passion for consumer education, it's very exciting. It wouldn't be an overstatement to call him a champion for consumer-driven healthcare and empowering members with information to make informed decisions for their healthcare and financial needs. So welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for the opportunity, having me speak to the audience today.
It was so great when I met you to see that you love this stuff as much as I do. And so before every episode, when I reached out, I want to know what our industry insiders, as we're calling them, can share with regular people who are just looking to navigate the healthcare system so we can help them to be better consumers. So I know today we're going to talk specifically about FSAs, item eligibility, and product awareness. So let's just dive in.
Excellent. Yeah. And, you caught the energy level, right? I mean, I tend to, geek out about things that I'm passionate about and, things that also hit, close to home from a personal perspective. We have, obviously with FSAstore.com, and we also have a sister site, FSAstore.com, bringing to market a portfolio of products that are fully eligible, guaranteed, takes all the guesswork out of how do I take my pre-tax dollars and spend them more effectively with confidence. And, what I get excited about, what kind of keeps me up at night and gets me up in the morning is, we're living in very interesting economic times, right? Record high inflation. It's more to fill your car up. It's more to bring groceries home. It costs more to live life, right? So we have some great vehicles with FSA products and HSA products where we can contribute pre-tax dollars to spend those hard-earned dollars more effectively. And I'm a big proponent of consumer-directed healthcare. And with that comes responsibility of education. And that's where I fit into this world. How can I become an educator? How can I create awareness, to help families spend those hard-earned dollars more effectively on items that they use every single day, but are completely unaware of that are eligible?
Yeah, I think a lot of people sign up for their benefits and they know they're taking medical, and they're not 100% sure all the time about what is the right amount to put aside. What can I even spend that money on? I don't know how much I spend in a year. What's the process? Because there's a process because it's a federally regulated reimbursement benefit, HSAs, FSAs, HRAs. All of that has rules and regulations around it, which are not the best. But I have to say, FSA Store makes it so easy to understand. Sunscreen is my big pet peeve, so I'm just going to get this out now. Mm-hmm. Sunscreen is both eligible and ineligible, because it has to have a certain SPF in order to make it an eligible item. That's what I love about the FSA Store, is that you really can go on, and if there's a general item you're looking for, it does a great job of helping to clarify exactly which items in that category are and are not eligible items.
100%. And the reason we brought that eligibility list to market is to speak to the mass confusion that exists in the space as far as understanding what can I use my FSA and HSA dollars on. It's dynamic. You can punch in any type of service or product that you're looking to confirm if it's eligible. And if it is, and it's a product that we house at FSAstore.com, you have the ability to obviously, purchase that item. But if it's not, like, for example, can I use my FSA dollars on copays or acupuncture or, things that obviously are more of a service, right? We confirm if that's an eligible expense or a non-eligible expense. And one of the reasons we felt like that was a responsibility of ours in bringing that to market is again, kind of a gross understanding or misunderstanding of the products that are eligible that folks are using every single day. And I think what was an eye-opening moment is, we had recently performed a survey in the market, and we asked the audience, right, of these 5 products, Tylenol, sunscreen, feminine care products, thermometers, Band-Aids, which of these products are FSA and HSA eligible? Only about 20% of that audience knew that collectively all those products were eligible. That was,
thermometers is a new one for me.
Right. And it constantly changes, right? So with the CARES Act, all the over-the-counter products that you would need a prescription on to have that be an eligible expense went away, right? And then the FemCare products also made its way into the approved products. So that opened up a portfolio of products that folks are consuming on a daily basis. And that consistently changes. And that's what we really pride ourselves on, is making sure that we're on the forefront of those involvements and that advocacy, to make sure that if there's a product that meets guidelines, that we get that incorporated into our offerings and then provide the education, the market that's needed. We all have things that we're specialists in, right? There's so many things, it's
right.
like, I'm just trying to get out the door on time, let alone figuring out what's an eligible expense with my FSA or HSA.
Yeah, but to put that money aside up front, so it goes into this untaxed account, and then spend money on things that you're spending money on anyway, to your point. And that list is so exhaustive. Thermometers is a new one for me, though.
It is, yeah. There's about 4,000 products that are FSA and HSA eligible, right? Well, so there's no.
Is that the good? That is both the good and the bad part of the FSA. Good because there is so much, and bad because there is so much. So right. If you're not sitting here doing this every day, and they're not as, the average user is not as familiar with that eligibility list, which is one of the things that is so beautiful about the list that you guys built, is that you just sort of go in and type in the generic topic, and it gives you all these variations of the thing that are eligible. And there are so many things, to your point.
Correct. In this year, obviously, contribution limits, change, per year. But for this year, an individual or a family can put in, basically $2,850, into their FSA account. Now, where the lack of product awareness is impactful is, where am I going to spend that pre-tax money? How do I fund that FSA appropriately? Is an FSA right for me? So these are questions you're going to ask, because an FSA product is a little different than an HSA product, where, it does exhaust at the end of the year. It's kind of use it or lose it, right? And depending on how the employer set up the plan, sometimes there's a grace period, sometimes there's not. So those are going to differ at the employer level. But with all that being said, folks sometimes are hesitant in maximizing that contribution because they don't want to lose the money. Totally get it, right? So, one of the things that we brought to market is a FSA calculator, right? That takes into account your income, your average medical expenses, how much you typically spend on some of these over-the-counter products that you may have not known were eligible. And it helps you kind of dial that in. How can I maximize my pre-tax contributions? Because at the end of the day, the average consumer, the average household spends a little over $1,000 on over-the-counter products, skincare products, menstrual care products, right? So right, that was a shocking stat as well, right? So if you can do that in a way pre-tax, essentially, you're saving around 30% on the products that you're consuming every day. So why not do it, right? We're all looking for ways to save money, and here's a very effective way to do that.
Yeah, well, and that's a good baseline, because one of the things I like about the calculator is there are some things I'm good at, and math is not one of them. Memorizing a list of 4,000 products is also not one of them. But the calculator helps you think about, if I'm going to put money aside in an HSA, how much money am I going to put aside so you don't spend the last month of the year buying $400 in Band-Aids?
Right.
It will help you understand, what are you spending money on? What items are eligible? Then what are you spending money on already anyway? And then what's that dollar amount? I love the calculators.
So, we've gotten to a place where we understand that there's, there's a lot of misunderstanding around product eligibility. So we solve for that. And we create tools so folks can budget more effectively for products that they're consuming every single day. And, one of the big enlightening points we identified as well, like I mentioned earlier, when we surveyed on these top eligible products, only 20% of folks knew that these products were eligible, right? And then we flipped it and said, now knowing these products are HSA or FSA eligible, how much more likely would you be to participate in these vehicles? The number's 98%. Once folks understand that these products are eligible outside of just using my FSA on medical expenses, let's say, okay, this is the right product for me. And now we have calculators designed so they can fund it with more confidence.
Yep.
So you're not underfunding, you're not overfunding, but you have that dialed in specifically to your needs.
If you can get a sense of what's eligible, I do feel like you feel better prepared to put money aside because you're more confident you're going to use it, because $1,000 is a lot of money. And it's a lot of money to set aside to say, I'm going to spend it only on FSA eligible things where maybe I could use that money on other things.
Sure.
But you're spending it on things you'd be buying anyway, and you're saving tax dollars. So that eligibility list, even before somebody goes into open enrollment.
Our goal is to empower folks with that information in an effort to put folks in a position of strength, right? To really take full advantage of how they're investing their healthcare dollars and how they're using them effectively.
All day, all day. You know, as an end user, I know talking to our customer service department, we said, you know, what are some of the pain points that people have with reimbursement plans? And they get calls on, why do I need to provide substantiation? What do you mean compression stockings aren't eligible? Compression stockings are eligible. I was told compression stockings are eligible. They're eligible with a certain compression. Why would the average everyday user know that?
Never.
And that's sort of the beauty of the eligibility
it'd be scary
list.
if they did. Yeah.
Well, right. Talking about the things that you do well and you know and you do all the time, that is FSA Store's strength. That is not the everyday user's strength, but the list, the eligibility list, helps to break down exactly what about that item where there's nuance makes it an eligible item. There's nothing more annoying than being an end user and finding out, you know, you have to pay the card back because it wasn't the right item. That's frustrating. Yeah.
How do we help flatten it out? How do we help pre-plan for open enrollment, create awareness so we can utilize these funds in real time, allow folks to avoid forfeiture? Getting into another topic, that's something that I know is familiar to you and I, where this year, I mean, they're anticipating potentially $1 billion of forfeited funds in the FSA product. Like, that's crazy. Right? We can avoid this. We can avoid this collectively. And I think that this is where this knowledge empowers folks to not just utilize the funds more effectively, but to make sure we're not forfeiting funds, but to really maximize, how we are investing in this great, pre-tax vehicle. And this year is interesting. There has been some grace period in rolling over these FSA funds, right? That all stops this year. What keeps us up at night is we need to get in the environment. Hey, you might have rolled over balances depending on how your employer set this up, where check with your employer. How much rollover funds do you have? When does that expire? Right? Because we don't want folks to forfeit those funds.
Right. Because it leads to a bad experience. And then you feel like you've wasted money instead of saving money when all day long, at least $1,000 if you set aside, you're going to spend on that.
Right. And then you mentioned earlier, too, the whole process of, I have to get reimbursed for my expense and submitting receipts. Like, who wants to do that? Right. So, everything through, FSA, store.com is auto-substantiated. So you come in, you use your FSA debit card, you're able to make that purchase. You're able to have confidence. There's no receipt submission process. There's no worried about things that are no longer, if this wasn't eligible and I utilize these pre-tax dollars on there. So it just
right sunscreens and the right compression stockings.
It's an environment where you can spend with confidence, you know exactly what's eligible. And, we have tools in order to determine, well, how much money best suits my health and financial needs, right? Because that differs for everyone. Average household spends a little over $1,000 on these OTC products, right? Some people are above average, some people are below the average, right? So, it's really dialing that in for the individual and this is kind of how I operate in life, right? So you want to be specific. You don't want to overfund. You don't want to underfund. You want to fund. It's like the Goldilocks and Three Bears.
That's exactly right. You want the porridge in the middle.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And the hardest part, if you were an average consumer and you wanted to understand the FSA eligibility list, when I have Googled it, you end up in like IRS terminology. No one wants to read that.
No.
No one wants to read that. So I feel like the format that FSA Store has is easy to understand, breaks it down into terms that relate to the items that you use anyway, and some items that you didn't realize you were using that are eligible, and you don't have to read a government document.
Yeah, 100%. I actually have this slide. So this is actually the top of the government website as it relates to FSA accounts. So I think this kind of sets the stage, right? So if you have a health plan through a job, you can use flexible spending accounts to pay for co-payments, deductibles, some drugs, and some other healthcare costs. Using an FSA can reduce your taxes, right? So the ambiguity comes in some other healthcare costs, right? So, and it's ever changing. The space depends on folks like FSAstore.com to really take ownership around what is approved. How do we condense that into a format that's easy to digest for the average consumer, right? The pandemic has changed the shift in how consumers are transacting in commerce. And, we've seen that obviously on our end, but, we're meeting folks with where they're at. And we think that's very important, and creating an environment that just eliminates, all the guesswork. And, the reason I was, honored to join our session here, today is, saving money is always important, right? Saving money in the economic times that we're currently in is essential. And there's some interesting things. I mean, 23andMe, genetic testing, therapeutic massage guns, if they have heat, right? So there's these little nuances on these popular products that you're like, wow, I had no idea this would be eligible.
I know. I could take one of those guns, those massage guns,
they're best-selling product, by the way.
And that's where I think FSA Store does a great job. It takes government speak and turns it into everyday person speak, and just makes it easy to understand if an FSA is right for you, how much that would be, and what things are eligible. So even if you just need to identify what the unique category is within the category, certain weight of compression stockings, you guys have it right on there. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I think this was super helpful.
My hope and takeaway here is this, right? So that folks understand that there are 4,000 products, of which you're probably taking some and consuming on an annual basis, that are FSA and HSA eligible. So let's visit FSAstore.com or HSAstore.com and figure out what are those products you're taking, right? And let's play with the calculators and really determine, like, how should I be funding these plans for my needs? We're here to save folks money, at the end of the day, and we do that through awareness and education.
Well, I appreciate it. And that's why I thought you would be wonderful to have on. So I appreciate your time very much. This podcast is brought to you by Nova Healthcare Administrators. Why did they let us do this? Because at the end of every day, every Nova associate is driven to do what is right. We want what's best for our clients and their members, and we do a great job sharing what we learn with each other. Between our colleagues and business partners, we know a lot of kind, smart, and thoughtful people who we convince to share their tips with you. Don't forget to leave a review, give us a like or subscribe, but more importantly, please share. We'll find the insiders if you share it with the outsiders. You can find our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much wherever you're finding podcasts. And we hang out on Twitter too at UNDR The Coverage.